Our key text is, "For there is no respect of persons with God," Romans 2:11. God recognizes no distinction of his rank. With him there is no caste. In his sight, men are simply men, good or bad. In the day of final reckoning, position, rank, or wealth will not alter by a hair's breadth the case of anyone. By the all-seeing God, men will be judged by what they are in purity, in nobility, in love for Christ. So as the title of the lesson says, overcoming bias, you see that God sees no bias in anybody. He has no respecter of persons. And likewise, we should also have this attitude. So, all right, so you can move on to Sunday, an attitude problem. So A asks, describe a common earthly tendency we may be guilty of, perhaps without even realizing it. Yes, ma'am? Yeah, you covered the question very well. So we have this tendency sometimes, even this can be so deeply embedded that it can just instinctively happen that maybe we kind of have this tendency to treat those maybe who are dressed better, who are more well off, to kind of be more hostile, to be more friendly towards them. And when we see those who are maybe more shabby or maybe who are a bit poor, we don't really kind of maybe tend to neglect them. But we see that this should not be the case with us. You see also in the second note, it's also mentioning how Christ became poor. And thing is, and you see that throughout his life, he was always reaching out to those who were maybe society outcasts, or they weren't considered that highly. And he was always humbling them and honoring them. So I think we can move on to question B. What must we realize about those who may be poor in this world's goods, but rich in faith? Yes, Brother.
Yes, we have to realize that on this earth, we are not here to be rich. This life, this earth is for short life, that we could prepare our characters for heaven. Life. And to grow our faith. So it's not important to be rich, but it's important to because that's what counts. The faith will help us to go far. The rich will in some places, we have a lot of people rich in the Bible mentioned, but to be rich is so many temptations to be involved, so many distractions, and we're losing trust in that who is foundation on everything. So faith is very important. We have to look at it.
Thank you, Brother Abor. Yes, Brother Orville?
Jesus says how hard it is for the rich to enter into the kingdom of heaven. And what he meant was not that he disapproves of those who are rich, because we see Job. But when Job lost everything, he didn't lose his faith. He wasn't concerned with his possessions. He's more concerned with his relationship with God. And as Brother Delbert said, when you're rich, it leads to many temptations. Pride, Now, if being rich and having much material goods was all that, then Hollywood or those people who have lots of money would be the model for society. And we look at their lives and, they're nothing to desire to be. So, my boy, he likes soccer and Ronaldo, these kids. So I got to work on a way how to explain to him without, destroying any faith or to explain to him where his allegiance needs to be. Our allegiance needs to be on, sympathies need to be on those who are poor in material goods, maybe, but strong in faith. And we see in the book of Acts where the believers they gave and they sold their lands, and so everybody was had the same. And so I'll just stop there.
Thank you, though. That's very good points. And so definitely when it comes to being rich, having riches on its own, it's not a bad thing at all. But we see that also, like, God often blesses those who are rich that they can provide their riches to further the spreading of the message and for His glory. And I think also when we realize, like, a lot of these celebrities, sometimes, like, often they're people who are coming from humble backgrounds, but we see a lot of times it happens, like, all the celebrities, you always hear these kind of scandals going on with them and, like, all these horrible things that they've been doing. So a lot of times riches often don't really help people in the end. And we also know when it comes to Judgment Day, like, none of this will matter anymore. All the riches will be destroyed, and ultimately everybody will be on the same standing. So, yes, Mom.
Verse says here, "Hearken, my beloved brethren, had not God chosen the poor of this world rich in faith," and so on and so on. We know who was first invited by Jesus to be His disciples. It was these brothers, Peter and his brother, and John, James and John, and Peter and Andrew, right? Were they rich people? No, they were not. We know that they were just fishermen, right? And they were making end each day. And so we have to understand that God loved the people, and God loved poor people because they're more acceptable to the truth, right? When you have rich people, most of them, I would not say all of them, right? They already have fulfillment in their life, but poor people are more open to many of these things and God's blessings.
Yeah, thank you, Mom. Yeah, I just want to briefly mention, I remember when we were going canvassing a few years ago, and, like, there was actually a difference. We were going to these, like, more upper income neighborhoods and more like these affluent and also maybe like lower middle class, and I could tell, like, that those who were like maybe like lower middle class, they were, like, more receptive to what we had and they wanted to listen. But I noticed when we was going to these more affluent neighborhoods, they were like, "Oh, it's okay, like I'm good, I don't need this," or, like, oftentimes they would, like, start even shutting the door right before we even finished. So definitely, I think there's definitely a difference, especially when it comes to those who are poor. Better Jim. Then we can move on to the next question.
The greatest minds in the world who have everything, they accomplish what they set out to get. They have fame and glory, and they have possessions. And yet, even though they have a high intellect, they still do not know the truth. The truth carries eternal weight and glory, and this is the ones who, which has already been said, it is the meek and the humble and the poor. They're more receptive to this because their life is not like in comparison to the others. The others are, like you have said, they have everything and they know everything. They don't need anything. But we who are poor and understanding and so forth, we know what we need in life. And Christ is able to fulfill that. The humble spirit, the teachable spirit is the one where we receive the greatest blessings above everybody else.
Thank you, Brother Jim. So yes, thank you for covering that. And now we can move on to our second section, Monday, discernment and fairness. A, explain the balanced approach that Jesus taught with regard to helping the poor. So, like, what is the example here given in Mark? Brother Dibler?
I mean, yes, we have here example of Mary hoarding oil whose money could be where that's kind of wasted, but more money could be used to help the poor. But teaching us here that Jesus said that no, let her do. It's will be written and will be mentioned through generations. Teaching us here that we have to understand that we cannot help all poor in the world, but we could try to help people around us. And but first we have to come to the Jesus. And that's the first. We have to come to him, and he will give us that strength that we helped the poor.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. So we see like the poor definitely have like definitely we should able to help as much as we can, but we see that they should not be, how to say it, like pampered in a way. Better Orville.
Yeah, in our society, wherever you go to Walmart, you buy something online, Amazon, they're always asking for donations. And I always defer, anyways, I always defer. Some carry the duty of, and from the notes, the duty of beneficence to extremes and really hurt the needy by doing too much for them. This is what you were talking about. The poor do not always exert themselves as they should. While they are not to be neglected and left to suffer, they must be taught to help themselves. And I see down, in our society again, our government gives money on a monthly basis. So my wife, she says, why are those people lying on the streets? Why ain't anybody help them? I said to her when she first came and saw it, I said to her, these people have more money than many people in the world. They can get up any moment and go to an office and get a check. You know what I mean? So they're not exerting themselves as they should. And because they have access to these funds and people are not, they're not being taught to help themselves.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Mom.
In the first part of the note, last sentence says here, while the poor are not to be neglected and left to suffer, they must be taught to help themselves. So we can help them, right? But you can help them other way, help them to find some work, help them to do something useful for the society and so on. And we have here example of Mary. We know that Christ was the special guest at Simon's place, and Simon was healed of leprosy. And he felt this big debt he's owing to Christ, so Mary was there, and we know that she bought this very expensive oil, and she broke this alabaster, and then she washed his feet with that, and she was also drying up his feet with her hair, right? And then Judah, who was everything but not that beneficial to our poor, was found to say, this oil should be sold and given to the poor people. He didn't say that because he really cared about, but because he was thief. He was always using that money for himself. But Jesus answered, why trouble you her? She had wrought a good work on me. And it says here that Jesus also made, a lesson for us. Although we have to take care of poor, we also have to take care about preaching gospel, spreading the truth, and so on. Wheresoever the gospel shall be preached throughout the whole world. So he said that what are we supposed to do? To spread the gospel, not only to care about the poor. Yes, we have to take care of them, but it's not all our mission. And it says here, by this we are taught that Christ is to be honored in the consecration of the best of our substance. Should our whole intention be directed to relieving the wants of the poor, God's cause would be neglected.
Thank you, Mom. Sister Angela, you.
All my goods to feed the poor and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. So this kind of sums it up, the priority that should be motivated by love, with the Holy Spirit directing us, so we will know when to give, who to give to, and how to go about doing it.
Thank you, Sister Angela. So yes, we see when it comes to for the poor, definitely we should care for them, but they should see that they are should not be that we do everything for them. We have to teach them how to provide for themselves, And it also mentions in the last part of the second note, should our whole attention be directed to relieving the wants of the poor, God's cause will be neglected. Neither will suffer if his stewards do their duty, but the cause of Christ should come first. So then we can move on to question B for Monday. In ancient Israel, what attitude was required of those who administered justice? Yes, Brother Orville?
Well, Deuteronomy says, Deuteronomy 1:17, you shall not respect persons in judgment, but ye shall hear the small as well as the great. You shall not be afraid of the face of man. And God requires us to honor the poor and the rich equally. And that's how he treats us.
Yeah, exactly. So it's has to be complete impartiality and like no respecter of persons in judgment here. Yes, Brother Dibor?
Yeah, even today in the Christian country's law, everybody are treated same by the law. Like we all same. The different story is that the rich people could hire the fancy lawyers or bribe the judges, but law it's same for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yes, Danielle.
Like that.
Oh, okay. I mean, I also want to bring a point. I don't know if you know the statue of Lady Justice, like in law, and how she's represented by having a blindfold, and she's like carrying these scales. And when the blindfold represents like impartiality, she doesn't see like who is who. She doesn't like see like, the background. She just like sees the facts or the case itself. I think also that's also like representation of how the justice system is supposed to work, like how zero impartiality, or yeah. So does anyone else have any thoughts for his question? If not, we can move on to C. Today, how should all in any church leadership capacity learn to apply this same principle? So how can church leaders learn to apply this principle of impartiality? Yes, Brother Orville?
Well, I'll read the note. Those who link their affections and interests to one or two and favor them to the disadvantage of others should not retain their position in office for one day, she writes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very serious.
Yes, very serious. So definitely, again, really emphasizing especially. Better Graham, yes.
There's just a natural tendency we have to like who we like and not like who we don't like. And there's a human tendency for sometimes there's a natural tendency for us to get along with certain types of people because we're more compatible with them. But when it comes to administration of the church office and administration of God's mercy and justice, he had the sons of thunder, and then he had the doctor, and then he had the lowest fisherman, and they were all equal in his eyes. And so we always have to remember that I think what it really plays onto is we have a tendency to compare ourselves with ourselves. And that, I think, is a great sin, because we can only compare ourselves to the holiness and justice of God, and we all need a Savior. It doesn't matter where we stand. And I think that's a trap Satan gets us into. And frankly, all the fashions of this world are based on comparing ourselves with others. It's like, oh, look what everyone's wearing, the greatest fashion. And it's a general tendency in advertising and society that we always compare ourselves. And there's only one, Jesus Christ. And his love it's matchless compared to mine.
Yes, thank you. Yes, very good point. Yeah, so it's this tendency really to compare ourselves and like others to ourselves and think like, oh, they're not really like me, and sometimes we just have a tendency to like downplay others or not to really treat them with respect as they should. And yes, Brother Jim. Sorry.
Sometimes we find ourselves in a clique where we have favorites, and these favorites, it's like what has been said many times, birds of the same feather like to flock together.
Yeah.
And so there is a commonality among us that we treat ourselves better than we do, say, somebody else who does not think the way we do or believe the way we do. We kind of shy away from them, and we treat them as such as that they are a little lower than we are because they don't think the same way as we do. And so this is partiality again, and it's an unfair communication among our relationships among everybody. And again, we have to level the plane, and the leveling the plane is believing for what is the value in somebody else, no matter what stage they are in life. Christ loved us in spite of ourselves, and we should do the same thing for others the same way.
Amen. Thank you. So I think we covered this pretty well. We can move on to Tuesday. Forming better habits. A. What rebuke does James give regarding the materialistic bias of professed believers, and why is this a serious matter?
It kind of plays into the previous question, and that where the most obvious thing that we can see is people's quality of clothing or dress, or maybe what their car is, or what. And the irony, I think, in this world is that sometimes the truly wealthy actually have very modest homes and modest vehicles, whereas those that are the poorest get into debt to buy the fanciest looking stuff. And the irony is that those who look the best are sometimes morally bankrupt. And yet we somehow in our society value what looks best rather than the heart. And the Lord looks at the heart. And we should be sure that we don't place value based off what we can see, because we can't see the heart.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, exactly. Especially like it says really in the note how it's talking about us, I guess, not trying to conform to these, these biases or to these materialism. And it says, God has acknowledged you before men and angels as his child. Pray that you do know this honor to the worthy name by which you are called, James 2:7. God sends you into the world as his representative. In every act of life, you are to make manifest the name of God. This petition calls upon you to possess his character. You cannot hallow his name. You cannot represent him to the world unless in life and character you represent the very life and character of God. This you can do only through the acceptance of grace and righteousness of Christ. So definitely we have to really practice the way we preach, and definitely we should not be focused on our outwardly appearance in this regard. So definitely we have to care more about what's on the inside rather than the outside. And definitely that should apply to also in our relations with others. They don't focus really on the outside, but inside.
And
yes.
I think it's important for us to realize as well that even if we could see the inside, we shouldn't judge either, because remember,
Absolutely.
Jesus he came and he washed Judas's feet. And so even if someone has got evil intents for us and plans to harm us or betray us, we're still supposed to wash his feet.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, so definitely, again, the whole concept of impartiality towards others. So if nobody else has anything to add, we can move on to question B. How only can we be victorious and rightly representing Christ? Yes, Brother Dalibor?
Only if we study his life on this earth. He spent 3.5 years here, what's recorded, and how he lived and what he did. That's what's required from us. So through our actions, through our studies, if we fully reflect his character, that's what we need to do. And our talks, they're supposed to be positive, encouraging. We try to help other people. We try to guide them, but in humble spirit, and with always try to glorify the Lord.
Yes, exactly, as you mentioned. So you have to constantly study like the life of Jesus. And there's also that question we should always ask if we're placed in that tricky situation. What would Jesus do if he were in my place? So definitely we have to think like, what would Jesus do in this situation? And it's also mentioning in the second note how we should always act from principle and never from impulse. And we're also discussing in the review lesson when it comes to how we should not act in an unrestrained manner and like not just like really necessarily always speak our mind. And it says also need a constant sense of the ennobling power of pure thoughts. The only security for any soul is right thinking. Yes, Mom? Mm-hmm. Exactly. Like, of course, like, there's always this kind of tendency to always hear gossip, like, oh, what did this person do this time? Or, like, it's always, like, more like negative things about people. But definitely we should not be striving just to hear about maybe, like, the negative things people do. But we should always strive to praise people, not obviously in a flattering way, but just genuinely to see the good others. So, does anyone else have any thoughts for this question? If not, we can move on to our fourth section, having royal behavior. So A, what does Scripture emphasize as truly essential to our Christian faith and why? Yes, Sister Jasmine?
Loving our neighbor as ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Andrew? Yes, Bernadette.
When the disciples came and asked Jesus how to pray, he gave them principles, and it was loving our neighbor as ourselves was a principle which is founded in forgiving them just as we're forgiven. And so, when we truly fulfill the royal law and love our neighbor as ourselves, we are just as forgiving to them as we desire to receive forgiveness from the Lord. And with that forgiveness and mercy, just like it was spoken earlier, when we focus on the positive of others, we inspire people to be positive. If you only focus on the negative, you inspire them to fulfill what you expect of them, because you expect negative. But if you see and expect the positive and highlight that, then that plant of positive attributes tends to grow.
Exactly. So yes, very important, like, to love our neighbors as ourselves. I think also, like, overall, like I said in the note, that's also really emphasizing the importance of the law, and how there's some Bible scholars think that we can put away the law and that we're not under the law anymore. But we see that the law is still very much applicable, and it's mentioning how, is in the Bible, nobody is referring to even Christ as putting away the law, and it's still very much applying to us. And normally, in our sinful state, we're under the law. Like, we see that we are condemned by the law to death because we see the transgression of the law, or in this case, is sin. But as it says that in the third part of the note, once surrendered to Christ, the mind is brought under the control of the law. But it is the royal law which proclaims liberty to every captive. By becoming one with Christ, man is made free. Subjection to the will of Christ means restoration of perfect manhood. So in order to really conquer, I guess, under this bondage of sin and, like, condemnation by the law, we have to ask Christ to help us in keeping the law, and in order to receive this liberty from the bondage of sin. Yes.
I think sometimes we need to remember that along with sin comes addiction,
Mm-hmm.
and being compelled to do something again, which is self-destructive. And anything that's addictive, you're essentially losing your free will, and so you're not free. Whereas when we obey the law, we're not addicted or compelled, but we are drawn by the love of God. And when love is our motive, rather than addiction, compulsion, like things that of this world that are addictive, we think of things like cigarettes. We're addicted to smoke and destroy your body. Alcohol, addicted to drink and destroy your liver. And there's like the more harsh things like cocaine and methamphetamines. Those things are people are compelled into sin. Those are things that are grossly obvious, but then there's more subtle things like pride.
Mm-hmm.
And pride can be just as addictive and more subtle, and we can hide it. They are socially acceptable sins, you might say, but they're still just as sinful, and they're both just as compulsive. Like they're just as addictive as drugs.
Yes. Very good point. Does anyone else have any additional points for his question? If not, we can move on to question B. So how does having bias, partiality, and or prejudice unpleasantly spoil our witness for Christ? So how can this spoil our witness for Christ by having these biases? Oh yes, better.
The irony is that if we have a bias for somebody, the bias is based on personal judgment. And if we're judging, we become a judge and not a doer of the law. And the very act of judging them, we condemn ourselves.
Exactly. A better Jim.
Yes, many times we see ourselves showing something that is in favor to ourselves, and we claim that we are followers of Christ. And of course, as it has been already mentioned before, if others see clearly through us, and we claim the name of Christian, we are what? Hypocrites. And we are doing a hypocritical endeavor in life that gives a bad name to Christianity. And in this, we destroy our faith, and we destroy the hope of others seeing who we are supposed to represent. So it is something that is it's a destructive element to say that we are something when we aren't. And of course, it causes others to lose faith in God altogether. And there's many arguments on that. Am I a true Christian in all that I say and do and live in this life that I have? And we must be aware of those around us, that they may see who we really are. And we want to show Christ as we contemplate upon Christ, and the mind brings out a lot of things in our actions. And so as we contemplate on Him, we are beholding by the things that we see.
Exactly. Thank you. Mom, did you want to add a point or? Okay. So yeah, so definitely when it comes, this can definitely spoil our witness to Christ, because we see that. Oh, sorry, you want to have a point?
Just going to say the last sentence of the quote there really brings it home, because while we can claim by word to be a Christian and profess, like the last sentence says, a right example will do more to benefit the world than all our profession.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I was in high school, at the end of the year, I went to a public high school, and people would sign your yearbooks. And one girl signed her yearbook, and she made a comment that I smiled to her every day. I had no idea I smiled to this person every day. I practically didn't remember noticing them, or that I did. And she said it brightened her day. And sometimes we don't recognize that little things we do, as simple as a smile, can have an impact on people. And so when people, it's more what we do than what we profess to do. That's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely, actions definitely speak louder than words, and people do notice that. And definitely, people will notice that. If for example, we read the example of Christ. Christ is obviously having no impartiality to anybody. He was treating everybody with respect. And so if they see that we are having this partiality or bias towards people, they're like saying, well, are you really Christians then if you're not really following what Christ does? So definitely in that case, you have to be very careful and be aware of how we act towards others, and realize that our deeds and actions definitely have influence on others and how they see us. So I think we can move on to our last section for Thursday, wise teaching and compassion. So A, what must we keep in mind in upholding God's moral law ourselves, as well as when sharing the truth with the next generation? Yes, Brother Delabar?
We like a human race, we are created to have freedom, to freely make our choices. And I know when I was young and when we are trying to go somewhere out, one older brother, he always was bringing this verse, that whatever you do, like one day you will be judged for it. And we have to all understand that in the end, it's that judgment, and we will be judged for things what we did.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
we have freedom, we have opportunity to make right choices, and Jesus Christ is there to guide us, lead us, and help us. But we have to trust Him, and we have to depend on Him that He could do that for us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yes, Brother Orville?
Yeah, when I was younger, I thought I was going to live forever. I was 18, 24. I was strong, I was fast, and I can drink copious amounts of alcohol and behave badly without seemingly any effects. But now that I'm older, I have a world of wisdom. So I say to my son, God has set me ahead of you. He's taught, I have all these wisdom to pass on to you. As brother said, for everything you do, there's going to be time of judgment. God's going to require of you an answer for these things, the way you behave in life. You don't need to do these things that I've done. You don't need to drink alcohol, because I've done it for you already. And I'll tell you the outcome of it. It's not good. And these words you can trust, my son. And then it says here, you know, when I discipline him, I'm not always to censure. And I keep that in mind. My father did that. He was very, you know, he censured. There's always, you know, the hammer. I got to be gentle and lead him to Christ. And I gotta teach him to trust me. And once he does that, I will have won him. And you know, there's a brother here who gave me some advice. He said, all you do it yourself. Teach your son. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, why wouldn't I do that? The brother's pretty successful, and I watch him. So I've implemented that. I try to do all I can to help him, because I know the burdens, I know the temptations that are going to befall him in life. So I always say to him, Obadiah, God has set me ahead of you. You don't need to do these things. I've done them all for you.
Thank you, Brother Orville. So yes, I all covered that question very well. I think I'd just like to close. I think with especially like the last part of the note, it says, this work is the nicest and most difficult ever committed to human beings. It requires the most delicate tact, the finest susceptibility, a knowledge of human nature, and a heaven-born faith and patience, willing to work and watch and wait. It is a work than which nothing can be more important. So even though we think that, like the law is just like a burden for us, like it's not really like true freedom, we see that the law is the law is a preserver of true freedom and liberty. It points out and prohibits those things that degrade and enslave, and thus through obedience it affords protection from the power of evil. So of course it's not like an easy thing to do, but as you know, with the power of Jesus and God, anything is possible. So maybe keep these thoughts in our mind, and thank you all for your participation.